Really cool. We are in Job chapter 6. You get the Psalms, turn left. All right, so we got some new folks in here that's not really up to where we're at in Job. I just want to kind of recap and explain what's going on. Do y'all know the book of Job? Anything about Job? Well, Job, in the very beginning, God says Job is an upright man. He's the best man in the land as far as being upright people. And then the devil comes up with the angels in heaven. The devil's able to go back and forth from earth to heaven. And God asks him, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm going back from earth to heaven." Well, God says, "Have you seen my servant Job?" And the devil tells him, Job will curse you to your face. The only reason that he respects you and the only reason that he does so good is because you bless him. And the devil talks him into letting his hedge of protection down around him, so the devil could, work on him. So the devil goes in and kills his family. He had 10 kids. Killed all of his livestock. He's one of the richest men around. Killed all of his livestock. Had a bunch of animals. Names all the animals. Names all of his, don't name all of his servants, but I would imagine that he has a couple of hundred servants, more than likely, by all the animals they name. Anyway, and 10 kids. Job's got 10 kids. House falls in on them. Kills them all. So all this happens to Job back to back all at one time, and then Job don't curse God. And the devil again comes back and forth, and God sees him and says, have you seen Job? You see how good he did? He didn't curse me. And then the devil says, skin for skin. If you make Job sick, he's going to curse you to your name. A man's in other words, when you get hurt, or if you're in danger, or if you're hurting, you're gonna do some outrageous things. You know how when people are really hurting, or if they know they're on their deathbed, they could be kind of mean. So that's the devil's thinking. If you touch him and you touch him, he'll curse you to your face. And God gives the devil permission to, touch Job, but don't kill him, is what he told him. He says you can do anything to him, but don't kill him. So Job ends up with these big bulls all over him. And it says that he goes out to a dung heap or an ash pile. It depends on whichever one you want to read. In other words, he's on the outskirts of town in the dump, literally, scraping his bulls with a piece of a broken pottery. Scraping his bulls sitting in an ash pile, or a dung heap is what it says. But and then it goes into what we are now. This is poetry. This is why Job is where it is. The book, the Bible's put into it's the first 5 books. It shows what Israel, how the Israelites or how the Jews come all the way to the promised land. And then you got Azariah and all these other ones, and then it gets on to poetry, and then it moves on to prophets and minor prophets. This is the starting of the poetry part of the Bible, but there's a very big lesson in Job. Where we are now is, you see this thing right here where I wrote? This is Job. And then from chapter 4 all the way to chapter 39 or 40, it's going to be back and forth between friend 1. It's going to be a conversation that goes back and forth like this. And that's what chapter 6 is like right here, I think, somewhere around in here. So when we get done with this guy, this is Eliphaz, we'll move to the next guy. I forget his name. Then it'll go like this again. They'll talk back and forth. And this is where we are. In the first part, Job begged to be dead. He begged for death. This is what he was doing. And then Eliphaz is the one that showed up and says, he tells Job, if you be living right, buddy, none of this would happen to you, is what he tells him. And the thought that this behind it is this is how they lived back then, and we even do it now. If you live right, good things will happen to you. If you're wise and good, successful in reward, that's what you'll get from God. But if you're evil, and I wrote stupid, disaster and punishment will come to you. Which is, for the most part true, but that's not something that you could just live by. Because we see people in the world that has nothing to do with God that are blessed. And then we see people that are saints that are dying from cancer. I mean, that has nothing to do with it. Even Jesus said the sun shines on the just and the unjust, and the rain falls on the just and the unjust. So, chapter 5 is where we just got done with. And chapter 5 was Job. It was Eliphaz. Part of Eliphaz is telling Job that he's, if he was living right, he wouldn't be under the persecution he was. And then it goes back to chapter 6, and this is Job. He's going to describe as a grief. Mine actually says grief is unbearable. So this is where we're at. Job, chapter 6, verse 1. But Job answered and said, "Oh, that my grief were weighed and my calamity laid in the balances together, for now it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words are swallowed up." He's saying if everything I've went through, my calamity, my being sick, and my losing everything that I've got, if you could put that in a scale and put all of my grief and anguish on a scale and then put all the sand of the sea on the other side of the scale, it would outweigh all the sand on the sea. That's a lot of grief and anguish.
Vastness and measure.
Some bad stuff has happened to me, and I kind of know where he's coming from. You don't have a will to want to keep going. You got to remember, he just lost his kids. He lost everything he had. He lost all of his wealth. His wife turned on him. His wife pretty much told him to curse God and die. That's what she said to him. You've got that wedge in between you and your wife. You've lost everything. You're sitting on the outskirts of town scratching bulls. And it gives you a hint here in a little while. I don't know if we'll make it that far, how long he's been out there. Verse 4, "For the arrows of the Almighty are within me, the poison whereof drinketh up my spirit. The terrors of God do set themselves in array against me." And this is how he feels. God did not do this to him. The devil did this to him. God allowed the devil to do this to him. But you got to remember, Job don't see the big picture. He didn't see chapter 1, 2, and 3. He just feels like God's against him. And I've been there too. Have you ever just said, why is this happening to me? Why would you do this to me, God? Why? What's up with this? It just feels like God is against you. And if you've lived a perfect life, you could say, see, even when this stuff happened to me and I was asking these questions, I wasn't living a perfect life, but I could imagine if I had been upright and never cursed God and I'd been an upright person, I would even be more miserable. It don't weigh out. I've been living a good life and this happens. Why? I don't understand. And he's trying to describe his frustrations that God's got his arrows in him and his poison in him. I'm just trying to. He just thinks God's against him at this point. 5, "Doeth the wild ass bray when he hath grass?" And this is a question. "Or loweth the oxen over his fodder?" He's saying, when the donkeys and the oxen are making all this racket, hollering because they ain't got no food, they have a good reason to be doing it. If there's grass out in the field, you ain't gonna hear the donkey crying out because he's hungry. You ain't gonna hear the ox, loweth. It means bellow, like making noise because he's starving to death out there. He goes, I have all the reason to be complaining. I don't, there's action to the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing. That makes sense. They don't just make noise if they got food to eat. They make noise when they don't have food to eat.
You know that scripture right there?
Yeah.
I had in Sunday school him a couple, 2 or 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And that's like people, as long as everything's going their way and they fine and everything, you don't hear nothing out of them. But when they get sick or get down or get in trouble, that's when you hear the most out of them. And that's what he's talking about there, He got reason to do that, but he still wouldn't complain.
Yeah, my other translation here says, don't I have a right to complain?
Mm-hmm.
Wild donkeys bray when they find no green grass, and oxen's low when they have no food. That's what I guess that describes it better than how I described it. He has a right to be complaining.
But we don't let go to God and we get in trouble. A lot of us don't even stop praying and thank Him for what He's done. But the minute something happens, that's the first thing we do is ask God to help. I'm guilty of it.
Yeah. He's going to describe it. This is part of the poetry now. The verse 5 and 6 are almost the same thing. It's their poetry was comparing and contrasting. Things would go in parallel, and they would either contrast each other or they would be compared to each other, and they would be like in like manner. It says, can that which is unsavory be eaten without salt? Or is there any taste in the white of an egg? And it has nothing to do with salt and eggs. It's just a contrast. You got people that complain when the food don't taste good. You got people that complain when it's the same thing over. It just simply means, I'll read it from a different translation, see if we can make sense of it a little better. People complain when there's no salt in the food and how tasteless it is the uncooked white of an egg. So it's just the same thing. He's got a right to complain. Life is not salty right now. It should be good. It's not savory. It's not doing anything for me. It's being bitter. And this is what he means by it. I got a right to complain because life ain't going all great. Before it was going great, but now it's not going great. I have a right to complain now. Can that which is, 7. The things that my soul refused to touch are as my sorrowful meat. You don't want to take a stab at that one? The things that my soul refused to touch are as sorrowful meat. Anybody got a different translation that words are different?
NLT is my appetite disappears when I look at. I gag at the thought of eating it. That's the NLT.
Yeah, that's what mine says too.
And 6 is don't complain about unsalted food. Does anyone want the tasteless white of an egg? So.
It says, my appetite disappears when I look at it and I gag at the thought of eating. Have you ever been so sick or so down and out that you would just not eat? You're just, what? That's how he's describing it. It's very weird to describe it like that, but that's how he feels. There's several different things that you could be. I remember when Elizabeth was pregnant one time, smells would set her off. Certain foods would set her off. I would set her off. Just like
Constantly.
you wouldn't eat because I mean you could be doing. And Brandy, bless her heart, we went out to eat. We was going to eat this big old steak, and the steak come by, and the smell of it made her nauseous, and we had to leave. So that's the way. That's the way old.
No, we ate, and when we got to the truck, she got sick in front of the truck.
No, we left that place because she felt sick, and then we went to a different.
That was a different time.
But this, I'm trying to describe how Job is not describing it well in here.
I
But
feel like it's when something's going on. Like I've been in a place where I just couldn't eat. I was so stressed out and so just very stressed out.
That's probably more better.
Yeah, not like literally just nauseous because you're pregnant.
You know what I mean. You know, just the smell of it. I was comparing it because, you know, he's talking about food, and just looking at food makes you sick because you're so upset. So sick. I don't know if he's sick or upset or both, or
Probably both.
it's bad. Job's got it bad right now. Y'all said Joel earlier, and I've been thinking about it. Oh man. He's talking about my soul refused to touch her as my sorrowful meat. So it's maybe not a physical food thing. I think there's more to it. 8. Oh that I might have my request, and that God would grant me this thing that I long for. And I'm pretty sure he's talking about dying. 9, even that it would please God to destroy me, that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. So, have you ever been to that point to where you just wanted it to end? That's a terrible thing. I think I've been there a couple times. Just want to end. Just let it end. Let it all be over with. But you gotta remember that God's plan ain't your plan sometimes, and that there is an end. Job don't have the beginning. He don't know why he's going through all this. He just wants it to end, and he's begging God for it to end. Verse 10. Then should I have comfort? He's saying in death there would be more comfort in that. Yeah, I would harden myself in sorrow. Let him not spare, for I have not concealed the words of the Holy One. He's saying right here, he goes, you know, if God would take me now, I wouldn't be sorry because I have concealed the words of the Holy One. I've not hardened my heart. I've not spoke against God. I hadn't tarnished my name. And I have not concealed the words of the Holy One. And this kind of reminds me of earlier when he was talking to Eliphaz in the beginning. Eliphaz told him, he says, hey, you've helped others. You've helped others, and you've done for other people, and you've helped people get on their feet, and you've helped feed them, and you've done all this stuff. But when calamity comes your way, you just crumble. You can't take it. And that's what he told him. So this actually makes me think that Job was probably a preacher or a priest or something. He was a higher up because he was doing sacrifices for his family and everything. So it makes me think that he's on up there, and he's saying that I have not concealed the words of God. When God's given me something, I've shared it with others, and I've tried to bless people. And he's saying I would take comfort if God would take me now and, not let me tarnish my name by keep on putting me through this. I bet you he's at his breaking point of saying, God, just cursing God. Of course, we know that God, he's not going to curse God because God said he wasn't. He already knows what's going to happen. 11, what is my strength that I should hope? And what is mine end that I should prolong my life? This is what it all boils down to right here is hope. If you don't have any kind of hope, what do you got for a future? Like a lost person has no hope. When calamity hits them, They would rather for it just to end and be done, but we have hope. We have we want to live on because we know that God's going to walk with us. He's never going to forsake us. He's going to be with us every step of the way. And we also have the hope that when we do go on, that we've got a place to stay. And Jesus made sure we had a place to stay. That's our hope. Now, I remember the days when I didn't have hope and it was miserable. I was miserable. I was a miserable person. I'd smile, but, down inside I was really miserable. And he says, what is mine end? This is the second part of 11. Think about the end. What at the very end of your life, what is your end? What's going to be at the end of the road? The younger ones, are you going to be able to get, married and have kids and have grandkids and see all this stuff? Job is at his end. He thinks it's all going to be over with. He's already had his whole life. He's had 10 kids, a wife, all this stuff. He's already, there's no way I'm going to be able to get that back. This is my end. I have nothing else to live for. I have no goals in life. Why should I want to prolong my life is what he's trying to convey. 12, is my strength the strength of stone, or is my flesh of brass? He's pretty much saying, God, am I made of a rock? Am I strong as brass? I mean, I'm a human being. I'm flesh and bone. I cannot take anymore. Is not mine help in me, and is wisdom driven quiet from me? He's saying he's helpless. Is not my help in me? I'm helpless. And the wisdom driven out of him is, he's not going no chance of being successful. No more chance of having anything else. It's all gone, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to get all that back. The wisdom is driven out of me? ? The other book explains it, and I don't feel like it jives with it. Let's keep reading. 14, to him that is afflicted, pity should be shown from his friends, but he forsaketh the fear of the Almighty. He's saying, you know what? And he's saying this out, but, he's kind of pointing to Eliphaz, I'm sure. He says, you have no pity for me. I'm afflicted, and you hadn't had no pity towards me. None. You hadn't showed any kind of pity. And by doing so, you are not scared of God at all. Because God teaches, you have pity on the people that are, need comfort. You're supposed to comfort people. You ain't supposed to, be mean to them. I read this thing, it says, and I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but it kind of goes along with it, I guess. The nicest words ever said was not saying unkind words. Something to that effect. It's the nicest words ever said are not saying unkind words. I think's I think that's how it read. The nicest thing you could ever do to somebody is not cut them down, not say anything ugly to them. Being ugly to them literally kills their spirit. It would be better for you not to say anything at all. The nicest thing you could have done was not to say, not to say that. Does that make sense? You're shaking your head. Nobody else shook their head.
If you don't have nothing nice to say about nobody, don't say nothing at all.
We are supposed to be kind to one another. Where was I at? Well, I was way over here. To him that is afflicted, pity be shown from his friends. Okay. 15, my brethren have dealt deceitfully as a brook. And he's fixing to explain something here, and I'm going to have to tell you what it means. His have dealt deceitfully as a brook. As the stream of brooks they pass away, which are blackish by reason of the ice and wherein the snow is hid.
You know, right here mine describes it as, Job describes his friends as being treacherous as a brook, a rocky watercourse that is dry except during rainy seasons.
Yeah, the way
it's become raging torrents when especially heavy rains fall.
the way it was explained to me, and that's the way it's explained, but we're going to talk about it some. Over there in the Middle East, everything's dry. In the wintertime, the mountains, the real high places, just like anywhere else, has ice and snow that accumulate up there. So when it it melts, it accumulates, and you have a wet season and a dry season. He's saying they're deceitful. They weren't no help. It's going to get into it a little bit more, but he's saying his friends were like water that had come down from there, gathered up in that little stream, and then withered away. Is what he's saying. That's what Chris just read, and it all has to do with where they're at, being in the desert and all this stuff. If you're going to go on a desert trip, and it gets a little bit more into it, but if you're going to go on a desert trip by foot or by camel or whatever, and you got to go 50 miles, you're going to be going at 5 miles an hour, and it's going to take you a long time. There's no way you're going to be able to carry enough water with you to make that trip. So if you go during the time of the year, there's a stream there, and the water's going to be there, that's when you're going to go. But he's going to explain, he goes, it's like they're going on a trip, and the water's supposed to be there, but it's not. It's something happened to it. You know what I mean? You've been to the creeks and stuff, the water be this high, and then during the summer, it'll be just a little trickle. That's what he's saying. This is how his friends are to him. And it explains it a whole lot more. What time they wax warm, they vanish. He's talking about, getting hot outside, the waters vanish. When it is hot, they are consumed out of their place. Again, that's the water vanishing. 18, the paths of their way are turned aside. They go to nothing and perish. 19, the troops of Tema looked at the companies of Sheba, awaited for them. They were confounded because they had hope. They came thither and were ashamed. And I think because of where what's his name? Eliphaz is a Temanite. So he uses this saying, when you were coming from where you were coming from, it explains it so much better in a different translation. Where you coming from, you were heading to that stream that's supposed to be there. And when you got there, it wasn't there. And that's what he's talking about. He was ashamed. For now ye are nothing. This is 21. Ye see my casting down and are afraid. Let's go back to 19 and 20. Let's read it in a different translation, see if we can make sense of this. 18. The caverns turn aside to be refreshed, but there's nothing there to drink, and so they perish in the desert. With high hopes, the caverns from Tema and from Sheba stopped for water, but finding none, their hopes were dashed. That's what they were talking about, a shame. So I explained it right. It's just really hard to understand. 21. For now ye are nothing. Ye see me casting down and are afraid. And he's talking to his friends here. He's saying, you see me in the shape that I'm in. I've lost everything. I'm sick. And you're looking at me, and now you're afraid because you're scared it's going to happen to you. And we do that too. If we're around people that are sick, we're not going to go around them because we're scared we're going to get sick. And that's what he's talking about. You know, or if you around somebody that stays in trouble, you're not going to hang out with them because you don't want to get in trouble. Well, this is kind of the same thought here. You're down here with me. You're being a good friend, but you're scared to death because you don't want this to happen to me or you. Have you ever said or thought, at least, you know, you see somebody that's going through something and say to yourself, man, I'm glad that's not me. I'm glad that's not me. That's the way he feels. You know, I'm glad that's not me. I'm terrified that it happened to me. That's 21. 22, did I say bring unto me or give me a reward for me or your substance? Now I think he's going back. He's telling Eliphaz here. He goes, did I even sin for you? I didn't say come to me. I'm sick, or I didn't say come bring me some money or come bail me out. We're fixing to get into the bail me out part. 23, or deliver me from the enemy's hand, or redeem me from the hand of the mighty. He's saying, you know what? I didn't call y'all here, and this is all from a response from the last chapter. He's saying, why are y'all come here and give me such a hard time and tell me that I'm a sinner, and all this is happening, and all my kids died because of something I did, and I didn't even call y'all to begin with. I didn't tell you to come here, bring me anything. I ain't ever asked you to deliver me from the enemy's hand. I've never, been one. Those kind of people. Those kind of people that call you up, hey, can you help me do this? Can you bring me some money? Can I borrow money? Can you come help me? I'm in jail. Can you come bail me out? Job's saying to him, I'm not this kind of person. You know me. And then he tells him in 24, teach me, and I will hold my tongue, and cause me to understand wherein I've erred. He's saying, you know what? Tell me. It's gonna hurt, but tell me. I won't talk back. I'll hold my tongue. Tell me what I did wrong. I'll listen.
The word error is referred to as the unintentional sin.
The unintentional sin? Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what he's trying to say. If I've unintentionally sinned, let me know. If you've seen my walk, and we should be doing that to one another. If you see somebody doing something they don't need to be doing, you need to go to them in love and tell them, this ain't the way that it's supposed to be. And Job says that to his friend. He goes, you see me doing stuff I don't need to be doing, tell me. 25.
He wanted to be honest, but gentle, not forceful, man.
Yeah, like they've been being rude.
Say it with love.
Yeah.
Not out of hate.
How forcible, this is 25, how forcible are right words, but what doth your arguing prove? Oh boy. There's some people you can argue with until the sun goes down and comes back up, and you've gained no ground. Like talking to a brick wall. It don't prove nothing. Arguing never proves anything. Just let it go. But how forcible are right words? This is what he's saying. If you're going to tell me something, if it's right, that's good. But we're not going to argue about it. That ain't going to prove nothing. 26. Do you imagine to reprove words? Did I say that right? And the speeches of the one that is just desperate which are as wind. Let's read that in a different translation just to see. 26. Do you think your words are convincing when you disregard my cry of desperation? That ain't the right one. Oh yeah, that is the right one. Do you imagine to reprove words and the speeches of one that is desperate, which are as wind? You know, desperate people say some pretty wild stuff. I bet that's what he's talking about. It's like wind. It ain't nothing. It's just like hot air.
Well, in this one it says Job's friends had not yet disproved his claim of innocence. They have only dismissed it. They hadn't really proved of his innocence. They just dismissed that and went on to something else.
Yeah. 27, he's still talking to his buddy here. Ye overwhelm the fatherless, and ye dig a pit for your friend. Now, overwhelming the fatherless could mean putting a kid into slavery, is one of them. But the other part of the slavery thing is dig a pit for your friend. Also talks about slavery. You remember? I can't remember their names, but the guy that got thrown in the pit got sold into slavery, and then went and ended up being like the main guy, and his brothers and his dad had to go up there and say, who was it?
David.
No, it wasn't David. It was the guy that got thrown in the pit. It's in the Old Testament.
Brothers stole it and threw it in the pit. Sold it to slavery.
Joseph. It's Joseph. This is what he's talking about. Even back then, is that people got stored in a pit with a thing on top of it. So the people would come through. Says, hey, what do you got? We'll flip up the thing. You know, that one looks good. Let me have it. And they would use people as instruments of tools. When the tool went bad, the tool broke a leg, you killed it and got a new tool. It wasn't a person. He's saying you're as bad as somebody that's going to sell their own friend. And that's what you dig a pit for your own friend, to throw him in there and sell him into slavery. It's the whole meaning behind that. This is a pretty good friend, ain't he? 28. Now therefore be content. Look upon me, for it is evident unto you if I lie. Now this is what gets me. What he's saying here is like Elizabeth does it to me all the time. Look me in the eyes and tell me that if she thinks I'm lying. Because you can look at somebody. He's saying, look me in the face and you could tell if I'm lying if you'll just look me in the face.
I don't do you like that.
Yeah, you have. This is what he's saying, though. This is what he's saying. You look at me, look me in the face. We've been friends forever. You can tell if I'm lying. I'm like really hurting, and I promise you, I ain't ever done nothing worth having this happen to me. 29. Return, I pray you. Let it not be iniquity. Let it not be why does it have to break up words? Inequity. Yes, but mine's broken into like a bunch of different pieces, and one's over here and one's over there. I'm going to start over. Return, I pray you, let it not be iniquity. Don't even make sense. Yea, return again, my righteousness is in it. He's saying right here, quit assuming that I'm guilty. I'm not guilty. I have been doing what I'm supposed to be doing. That's what he's talking about. That's what he means.
He was so sure that he was all
Yes.
happened to him because he did something.
Oh, yeah. The cause and effect thing. He's like, just look me in the face. I promise you. Quit assuming that I'm guilty. I'm not guilty. Is there an inequity in my tongue? Does it sound like I'm lying? Cannot my taste discern perverse things? He goes, I can tell the difference between right and wrong. I know the difference between right and wrong. I've got discernment. I know that I ain't been messing up. What time is it? It's time to go, ain't it? Dang. I was going to get to chapter 8. I would have got to chapter 8.
How?
I don't know.
You never understood it.
I still don't understand half of it.